You're staring at your phone at 11:47 p.m. and the text you sent 6 hours ago is still sitting there with no response. You're not angry about it. You're not even surprised. You just notice that the part of you that used to care about getting a reply back has gone completely quiet. And here's the part nobody talks about. That silence isn't weakness. It's the sound of a man who stopped offering pieces of himself to people who never asked for them in the first place and never seemed to notice the cost of taking them. I know this moment because I lived it. Not the dramatic breakup, not the big fight, just the slow realization that you'd been doing all the reaching, all the planning, all the emotional work, and somewhere along the way you just stopped. Without an announcement, without a conversation, you simply went quiet because nothing needed to be explained anymore. Well, you think this is your story, but it's every man's story in 2025, or at least far more common than anyone openly admits. We're living through the largest silent retreat from dating in modern history. 63% of men under 30 are single, and most of them aren't talking about it. They're not posting about it. They're not even admitting it to themselves. But something fundamental has shifted in how men engage with romantic relationships, and the shift happened so gradually that even we didn't notice it at first, until the distance began to feel normal. Here's the hidden truth that's been eating at you. You didn't lose interest in love. You lost faith in the cost of pursuing it. Every text that goes unanswered, every plan that gets cancelled last minute, every conversation where you're doing all the emotional heavy lifting, these aren't just disappointments anymore. They're data points, and your brain has been calculating the return on investment without you even realizing it, quietly, efficiently, and without emotion. But here's where everything changes. You remember when you used to get excited about a first date. The anticipation, the possibility, the way your mind would run through scenarios of how the conversation might unfold. You'd plan what to wear, where to go, what to talk about. You invested mental energy in the potential of connection because it once felt worth the effort. Now you sit across from someone at dinner and you're already calculating how much this evening's going to cost versus how much genuine interest you're actually sensing from the other side of the table. That shift didn't happen overnight. It happened over dozens of interactions where you slowly learned that enthusiasm isn't reciprocated, effort isn't matched, investment isn't returned. You started noticing that the women you were dating seemed to be evaluating you more than enjoying you, measuring instead of connecting, like you were auditioning for a role in their life story rather than writing a story together. I watch men in coffee shops now, and I can see it in their body language. They sit across from dates with their shoulders slightly turned away, not rude, not disengaged, just protected, as if experience taught them what optimism couldn't. They've learned to hold something back because experience taught them that giving everything up front leads to being taken for granted. You already know this. I'm just saying it out loud for you so you stop questioning your own instincts. The turning point came when you realised you were more relaxed alone than you were with most of the women you'd been dating, not because you don't like women, not because you're antisocial, but because being alone meant you could drop the performance. You could stop managing someone else's expectations. You could stop trying to be impressive and just exist in your own space, without judgment or negotiation. It's a Thursday evening and you're driving home from work with your music playing. No one is texting you, asking where you are or what time you'll be home. No one needs you to pick something up or remember something important. No one is in a mood that you need to navigate, just you, your thoughts, and the freedom to go wherever you want or do whatever feels right in that moment. And you realise this feeling of peace has become more valuable to you than the possibility of companionship that comes with constant emotional management. Nah, you didn't choose to become this way. You adapted to become this way because adaptation was the only option that didn't hurt. But the truth was still waiting for you. Modern dating taught you that your natural instincts were wrong. Your desire to commit was seen as pressure. Your willingness to plan ahead was interpreted as controlling. Your emotional investment was met with requests for space. So you learned to hold back, to play it cool, to match energy instead of leading with your own, even when that wasn't your nature. And slowly, that holding back became your new normal. Many men describe feeling like they're constantly auditioning in the early stages of dating. Every text is analysed for tone. Every date is evaluated for compatibility metrics. Every interaction feels like a test where the criteria for passing are never clearly explained and constantly shifting. You find yourself walking on eggshells in situations that should feel natural and easy. You notice you've stopped sharing the things you're genuinely excited about because you've learned that enthusiasm can be interpreted as intensity, and intensity makes people uncomfortable, so you've become smaller in your interactions, more careful, more curated, safer but less real. And the irony is that in trying to be what someone else might want, you've lost touch with who you actually are. The psychological breakdown happens so gradually that you don't recognize it until it's already complete. You start editing yourself in real time, monitoring your own responses to make sure they're appropriate, second-guessing your natural reactions. You become hyper-aware of how much space you're taking up in conversations, how much attention you're asking for, how much investment you're showing, as if your presence itself needs justification. This isn't just dating fatigue, this is identity erosion. You've been so focused on being acceptable that you've forgotten what it feels like to be authentic. And the exhausting part is that all this self-monitoring and emotional labour doesn't even improve your dating success. If anything, it makes you less attractive because authenticity is magnetic, and you've been practicing the opposite of authenticity for months or years without realising it. But here's the part nobody talks about. The cost of returning to active dating isn't just the risk of rejection, it's the risk of losing the peace you've built in your absence from it. A peace you earned, not one you stumbled into. You've rediscovered what it feels like to wake up without anxiety about whether someone is going to respond to your message. You've remembered what it's like to make plans based on what you actually want to do, rather than what might impress someone else. You've tasted the freedom of not having to manage anyone else's emotions or expectations. Going back means voluntarily surrendering that peace. It means opening yourself up to the cycle of hope and disappointment that you've finally escaped. It means returning to a game where the rules seem to change constantly, and where your best efforts often go unappreciated or unnoticed, no matter how sincere they are. You've spent months or years learning to be content with your own company. You've developed hobbies that actually interest you rather than hobbies that look good on dating profiles. You've built routines that serve your actual needs rather than routines designed to make you appear more attractive to potential partners. Why would you give that up for the uncertainty of modern dating without clear reciprocity? And this is where everything changes. You realise that your withdrawal from dating wasn't a failure. It was self-preservation. It was your subconscious mind protecting you from a system that was extracting more value than it was providing to you personally. Your silence wasn't giving up. It was boundaries. Your lack of pursuit wasn't fear. It was wisdom earned through experience. The new realisation hits you like a quiet revelation. You haven't been avoiding relationships. You've been protecting the life you rebuilt when you stopped chasing them. The version of yourself that exists when you're not trying to be attractive to someone else. The peace that comes from not having to prove your worth to people who never asked for the proof in the first place, or valued it when it was offered. You're not broken. You're not damaged. You're not afraid of commitment. You've simply reached a point where the juice isn't worth the squeeze, and that's a completely rational response to the current dating environment as you've personally experienced it. Your silence isn't a problem to be solved. It's a boundary to be respected. But the truth was still waiting for you. The truth was still waiting for you. Microfix, clarity plus emphasis. The recognition came slowly, like watching daylight fade through your living room window. You weren't tracking it minute by minute, but suddenly you realized you'd been sitting in darkness for an hour without turning on a lamp. That's how your relationship with dating ended. Not with a decision, not with an announcement, just with the quiet understanding that you'd stopped participating without ever choosing to quit. You've been living this for months now, maybe longer, the shift from hoping she'll text back to not expecting her to text back. From planning what you'll say next to not saying anything at all. From wondering if you should ask her out again to wondering why you would want to, when the pattern is already clear. But here's the part nobody talks about. The silence you've chosen isn't defeat. It's the first honest conversation you've had with yourself in years, and it didn't require permission. I know this territory because I walked it before you did. That landscape where effort becomes exhausting and enthusiasm becomes embarrassing, where you slowly realise that the energy you've been putting into dating could power a small city, and the return on that investment couldn't power a flashlight for more than a moment. You think this is your personal failure, but it's actually the most common male experience of our generation right now. We're living through an emotional recession that nobody wants to acknowledge. Men are going quiet not because they're weak, but because they've finally done the math on what modern romance costs versus what it provides for their long-term well-being. And the math doesn't lie. You remember the exact moment it started, don't you? Not the moment you gave up, but the moment you first noticed the imbalance. Maybe it was realizing you'd sent the last 5 texts in the conversation. Maybe it was being the one who always suggested plans while she always had to check her schedule. Maybe it was sitting across from her at dinner and sensing that she was mentally comparing you to someone else while you were just trying to enjoy her company. That moment when you understood that you were working harder for her attention than she was working for yours. When you realized that your interest was being treated as a given, while her interest felt like a privilege you had to earn repeatedly. The exhaustion started there. Not physical exhaustion, emotional exhaustion, the kind that comes from constantly calibrating your behavior to maintain someone else's comfort level, while your own comfort level steadily erodes without acknowledgement. But this is where everything changes. You started editing yourself without realizing it. Your natural enthusiasm got dialed down because you learned that excitement could be interpreted as intensity, and intensity made people uncomfortable. Your willingness to plan ahead got labelled as pressure. Your desire to commit got framed as moving too fast. So you learned to hold back pieces of yourself to avoid making anyone else nervous about your intentions, even when those intentions were genuine. The cruel irony was that in trying to be what someone else wanted, you lost touch with what you actually were. You became a performance of yourself rather than yourself. And that performance was exhausting to maintain, especially when it didn't seem to be working anyway. I watch men in their cars after failed dates now, sitting in parking lots with the engine running. They're not angry, they're not heartbroken, they're just tired. Tired of translating their natural impulses into socially acceptable behaviour. Tired of pretending that casual dating feels natural when commitment is what they actually want. Tired of acting like they don't care as much as they care. You know exactly what I'm talking about. The psychological breakdown happens in stages, and you've lived through most of them without naming them. Stage 1 was the realization that your authentic self wasn't being well received. Stage 2 was the decision to modify that self to be more palatable. Stage 3 was the discovery that the modified version wasn't particularly attractive either, just safer. Stage 4 was the exhaustion that comes from maintaining a version of yourself that doesn't feel genuine. And Stage 5 was the quiet decision to stop performing entirely because the performance was costing too much. You didn't announce this decision. You didn't even make it consciously. You just gradually stopped reaching out first, stopped suggesting plans, stopped investing emotional energy in people who treated that energy like a renewable resource that would always be available no matter how little they contributed in return or acknowledged. Many men describe this phase as feeling like they're speaking a different language than the women they're dating. They want to build something together, but she wants to see what develops. They want to plan a future, but she wants to stay in the moment. They want to commit their resources to something worthwhile, but she wants to keep her options open. The frustration isn't that she wants different things. The frustration is that what she wants requires him to suppress what he wants. To pretend that uncertainty is exciting instead of draining. To act like emotional investment without commitment is satisfying instead of hollow when it isn't. But here's the part nobody talks about. You discovered something profound in your withdrawal from dating. You rediscovered what it felt like to live without constantly managing someone else's emotional temperature. To make decisions based on what you actually wanted instead of what might impress someone else. To spend your time and energy on things that gave you genuine satisfaction instead of things that might make you more attractive to people who weren't that interested in you anyway. The peace that came with stepping back wasn't the peace of giving up. It was the peace of stopping the struggle, of no longer swimming upstream against a current that seemed designed to exhaust you, of finally admitting that maybe the game itself was the problem, not your ability to play it. You've been living in that peace for months now, and you've noticed something unexpected. You sleep better. You think more clearly. You enjoy your own company in ways you'd forgotten were possible. Your weekends belong to you again. Your emotional energy goes toward things that actually matter to you instead of being absorbed by people who take it for granted. And this is where everything changes. The cost of returning to active dating isn't just the risk of rejection or disappointment. It's the risk of losing the clarity you've gained about what your time and attention are actually worth. You've learnt to value your own peace more than someone else's approval. You've remembered what it feels like to live for yourself, instead of living to be chosen by someone else. That recognition is what you've been living with for months now. The understanding that your silence wasn't weakness or fear or failure to step up. It was the first healthy boundary you'd set in years. The first time you chose your own emotional well-being over someone else's convenience. You stopped trying without saying a word because words had stopped meaning anything. Actions had stopped meaning anything. The entire language of modern dating had become noise, and you finally learned to speak fluent silence instead. That silence isn't empty. It's full of the man you remembered you were before you started editing yourself for other people's comfort. Full of the peace that comes from not having to prove your worth to people who never asked for the proof in the first place. You feared the silence once. Now it's the only voice that tells you the truth. If this spoke to you, you're not alone in walking this path. There are more men choosing silence than you think,